Violence shall no more be heard in thy land, wasting nor destruction within thy borders. But thou shalt call thy walls salvation, and thy gates praise. The sun shall be no more thy light by day, neither for brightness shall the moon give light unto thee. But the Lord shall be unto thee an everlasting light, and thy God thy glory. Thy sun shall no more go down, neither shall thy moon withdraw itself. For the Lord shall be thine everlasting light, and the day thy people also shall be all righteous. They shall inherit the land forever, the branch of my planting, the work of my hands, that I may be glorified. A little one shall become 1,000, and a small one a strong nation. I, the Lord, will hasten it in his time.
The ocean spirit dances today to abundance and joy and to eternal peace.
Jake about to live, man. Jake about to truly live forever. And how we gonna tap in? Through this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, which is gonna lead us into eternal life. This wisdom is gonna bring us into the kingdom of heaven, which starts with the elect. In Lord's will, we are those men. This is the book of Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6, and verse 17. And it reads, "For the very true beginning of her," and her represents wisdom, "for the very true beginning of her is the desire of discipline, and the care of discipline is love, and love is the keeping of her laws, and the giving heed unto her laws is the assurance of incorruption. Therefore, the desire of wisdom bringeth to a kingdom." So this wisdom is going to bring us into the kingdom of heaven, because it starts with the Lord's men. "If your delight be then in thrones and scepters, O you kings of the people, honor wisdom, that you may reign forevermore." You see?
To the glory of our golden age, may it shine forever.
So we're going to reign forever. Lord's willing, we are part of the elect.
Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife hath made herself ready. And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of saints. And he saith unto me, Write, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he saith unto me, These are the true sayings of God.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem Kakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful elect out there pushing his word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem Kakadash. Also like you pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashim Shah. All right, and what I want to get into with this lesson, is dealing with, all right, he is not in control. All right, he's not in control. And he is referring to Esau Edom, and he's not in control of prophecy. Okay, he's not in control of prophecy, and the Heavenly Father. Because you go here, as we always go into Job 9:24, okay, just to read it, and expound on Job 9:24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covered the faces of the judges thereof, if not, where and who is he? Now, he covered the faces of the judges thereof is an indicator of who the wicked is, okay? Because who presented themselves as the Most High, okay? What nation of people presented themselves as the Messiah, okay? This Jesus Christ character, okay? What nation of people are claiming to be the chosen people in the land, all right, in our land right now, okay? Claim to be the prophets of the Bible. You see? Who done that? It's only one nation of people, and it's a so-called white man, which we know they're according to the Bible. Okay, and according to the Bible, they are the wicked. So when they say the earth is given into the hand of the wicked, well, you have to ask yourself, okay, if someone is able to give, okay, authority of the earth to someone else, well, who has the most authority? Who's really in control? All right, because if you have to be given something, well, who's in authority? Who's in control? Okay, so you look out, all right, in the planet Earth, and you see that this devil, you know, has control over so much. Well, what authority gave him this control? It's our power, you know, it's our power, our Heavenly Father, Yahweh, through his son, Yahweh Shai, you know, because you go into, all right, the status that Esau, Edom has today. Well, it goes back to the blessing that was given to him by Isaac. You see, it goes back to the blessing that was given by Isaac, all right, which we know is Yahweh Shai. All right, if you have ears to hear, you see, so the earth has been given to the hand of the wicked. You see, so all authority that this devil, you know, boasts in, okay, all this authority that this devil, you know, has him proud and puffed up. Okay, well, it was given to him by our power, you know, even Yahweh Shai during the time of, okay, the Romans, okay, which Esau has revived, okay, Rome and the earth today. You know, this is an extension of the Roman Empire, okay, that we live in today, you know, and he wants to make it digital. You know, he wants an eternal digital Rome. All right. Now, when you go into this dialogue between Yahweh Shai and Pilate, all right, this Edomite, well, listen to what Yahweh Shai tell this nigga, man. John 19:9, it says, and went again into the judgment hall. And, let me see. I started at 8. Said, when Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid, and went into the judgment hall and said unto Yahweh Shai, whence art thou? But Yahweh Shai gave him no answer. Then said Pilate unto him, speakest not thou unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee and have power to release thee? Okay, so this is Pilate. He's a Roman governor, you know, which he had the last say so, you know, because this was his providence, you know, Judea, you know, and they couldn't put Yahweh Shai to death without the permission of the Roman government. And that's why they were trying to heap up, all right, charges that will stick in the Roman court. You know, when you go into it, they were trying to heap up charges, all right, that will stick in the Roman court. You know, because they didn't have power to put Yahweh Shai to death. They had to go through Rome. Okay. So Pilate, you know, he's full of himself and he condemned himself too, because the devil, you know, he tried to wash his hands like he's free of the guilt, you know, of the crucifixion. But no, he had the power to stop it. You see, but it was meant because Yahweh Shai had to be their sacrifice. Okay. And the Most High wanted to condemn these goddamn Edomites and these 2/3 niggas, man, because it was 2/3 niggas. All right. These niggas that gave up Yahweh Shai, guess what? They're back today in that lot as 2/3 awaiting judgment, man. You see? It said, then said Pilate unto him, speaking is thou not unto me? Knowest not thou that I have power to crucify thee and have power to release thee? Yahweh Shai answered, thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given. You see that? The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Okay, from the Father. Therefore, he that delivered me unto thee have the greater sin, man. Speaking of them niggas from back then, man. Okay. So Yahweh Shai let Pilate know, like, look, man, the power you got came from my Father, man. That's the only reason, okay, you have authority in this situation, in this moment, okay? Because during this time, this was the time of the fourth beast. It was time for Rome to rule, okay? It was time for Rome to rule. So that's why, Pilate is in the position he's in. All right, the Edomites, they was in the position they was in at the time. These Edomites were Rome, okay? Because the Lord ordained, all right, the fourth beast to rule in this time space, man. Okay, just like this fourth beast fell, Rome fell, all right? But the Lord ordained it to come back. It was written for it to come back. John the Revelator spoke, okay, of Rome falling and coming back, okay, in the book of Revelation. When you go here, okay, Apostle John, and this was when Rome was in the peak of his power. You go here because by the time Apostle John was on the Isle of Patmos, that was during the time of the Flavian dynasty. Okay, I want to say, and that's when Rome, all right, was at the peak of his power. It had went through, some destabilization. The year of the four emperors, and then you had the Flavian dynasty started by Vespasian. They revived Rome. Okay, so John the Revelator, he's probably during the time of Pax Romana. Okay, but when you go into Revelation 13:3, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and one of the heads was the Roman Empire. Those 7 heads that's on, all right, this dragon, all right, well, one of those 7 heads represent the Roman Empire, pagan Rome, and it was wounded, okay, by what they call the Dark Ages. Western Rome fell. Jake had fully, taken over, okay, and it was now, being called the Holy Roman Empire, during Constantine. Now Jake was ruling before then. Jake, matter of fact, Jake came right after the Flavian dynasty, okay, and began to be emperor, okay. But you had the kingdom, had Rome had split into 2 parts, the western and the eastern, and Jake was ruling in the eastern part of Rome, okay. But you had Nerva, all right. You had what they call it? Was it the 5 good emperors? Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Marcus Aurelius, and another guy. So it was 5 good emperors. Okay, but them was all Jakes. Okay, and they go back even before 100 AD when you go into their history. Okay, but nevertheless, Esau had lost, eventually lost all authority in Rome. Okay, so his empire was wounded. You see, to death, because he was out of there, man. You see, Esau was pushed completely out of authority. It says that his deadly wound was healed. Yeah, so during the time of the Roman Empire, when it was still up and running, John the Revelator prophesied that it would fall from power, but then his wound would be healed, which means it will come back. So the only reason that Esau was able to come back because it was ordained by the Lord. Okay, the Lord signed off on this nigga coming back into power. Okay, it was nothing great that he did. You can go into the history, and the Ottoman Turks, those Edomite, those Islamic Edomites took down, the Byzantine Empire. Okay, Rome fell. Where really at this time the capital of the Roman Empire wasn't in Rome; it was in Ayatollah. All right, modern day Turkey. Okay, so it fell to Edomites, the Ottoman Turks. All right, and then a few decades later, you had the what you call Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. All right, they eventually took down the Moors. Okay, in what you call the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, which is Spain and Portugal. Okay, So when they took down those two strongholds, those devils really started to establish themselves in the earth again, but it was ordained because the deadly wound being healed, because it was ordained, okay, on high. If the Lord didn't speak it, these devils wouldn't have never came back into power. If it wasn't in the script, these devils wouldn't have came back in power, man. You know, but this was Esau fully coming into his blessing that was given to him by Isaac during the Renaissance. Okay, because he fully came into that blessing from Genesis 27 during the Renaissance. All right, the fatness of the earth. You know, he would dominate the earth with the sword. Okay, he really came into his fulfillment during the Renaissance. You know, so his deadly wound had to be healed for the sake of prophecy, man. It says, and all the world wondered after the beast, you know, and this man, he set himself up to be the standard of the earth, you know, especially with America, man. You see, Esau was able to turn America into not only an economic power and the military power, but a cultural power. You know, the culture of America dominates the earth. Okay, so you look at this man, and this man, you know, he dominates, you know, every sector of reality, man. You know, I say militarily, financially, economically, okay, culturally, all right, resources, trade, you know. You see, his so-called technology, his technology, his so-called science, you know, which is BS and damn fraud, okay. But this man has controlled every aspect of reality for a while, okay, which has this man proud and delusional, okay, as if he can extend his own kingdom, as if power wasn't given to him, okay. So you look at this man and how he moved, okay. You look at it on the surface level and it's like, damn, what can be done with this nigga, man? Okay. But the same one that gave him the power is the same one that's going to come take the power from him. Okay, because you go, matter of fact, let's play this clip real quick. You know, you got this Jake, because this one inspired a lesson, a video I got from the brother Yaqua, Hopeful Lake 3. Okay, so you got Jake, you know, he's speaking, you know, because it's one thing to state the obvious, because it's 2026, so it's obvious that this nigga controls everything. You see, that's not a you see, it's not a hard thing to come to a conclusion that this nigga run everything, man. Okay, but the thing is, this nigga's on his way out. You see, that's the news. That's the headline to talk about. Is this nigga's on the way out. See, understanding that he's in control of everything, it is a beginning, you know. And this Jake talking, and maybe, hey, hopefully he come fully into the truth, you know, because you can tell he been listening to particular things. Maybe he been listening to the brothers or whatever, you know. Or hopefully he fully come into the truth and repent, okay. But stating that this nigga in control of everything, well, that's the obvious, okay. To really go into, you know, what's news breaking is the Lord is getting ready to remove this man from power. Okay, so let's play this.
Damn. So much for democracy. Damn. They control the seats. They control the House. They control the president. They control the music. They control the banks. They control the hospitals. They control the news. They control the social media. They control TikTok. They control our freedom of speech. They control everything. If y'all know who I'm talking about, then you know who your enemy is. If you don't know who I'm talking about, your little ass is lost in the sauce. You're lost in the sauce, Vic. That's all I'm saying.
You know, so Jake is calling out, all these things that Esau controls, which we understand these things were given to him to control. Okay, so Esau has no power within himself. All right, so understanding that he controls these things, well, that's step one. Okay, but when you go deeper into, all right, when you go beyond the surface, all right, and there's something above this nigga. You see, there's a power that's operating above Esau. All right, that's above these elites. You see, so it's one thing to, all right, know that this devil controls all these different things. Okay, but what's the end game? What's to come? Okay, what is he doing? You see, because this devil is trying to pull something off. All right, that's in complete defiance to Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. All right, and that's why the scriptures say. Matter of fact, let's get that in Job. Let's get another one in Job. Let's get Job 21. Okay, so you go to Job 21 and 29. It said, "Have you not asked them to go by the way, and do you not know their tokens?" All right, and the token is what? A sign. All right, you go into the word token. You see, ultimately it's the prophets. Have you not asked them to go by the way? You see, because the prophets are in with the highways and byways, teaching this word. So as our people, they're able to come across, all right, the prophets. Well, the prophets have the answers. Okay, they point to the so-called white man being Esau. Okay, because knowing that he runs everything, okay, that's cool. And like I say, that's a start. Okay, but who is it that runs everything? Because they're not white people. They're not European. All right, they're not Jewish. No, they're Edomites. Okay, and when you put a title on the devil, when you put a biblical nationality on the devil, well, now the Bible opens up and begins to show, the future. Okay, it begins to show the end of this man. Okay, it begins to show this devil's judgment that's to come. Okay, it begins to show that the Lord is angry at this man. You see, when you put a biblical nationality, okay, on a so-called white man, okay, and this is why this devil, he hates to be called Esau. He hates being linked to an Edomite, okay, because there's a judgment linked to that. You see, so when you go into this word token in the Hebrew, all right, it's a hath, okay, a hath, which when you go into it says a distinguishing mark, okay, it says a banner of remembrance, it says a token, sign, sign, standard, miracle, or proof. Okay, so this devil's actions is proof of who he is. It said he covered the faces of the judges thereof. All right, if not, where and who is he? You see, so who covered the face of the judges? Esau. Okay, who's trying to who all right, what's the only nation to do so? That's proof of who he is. Okay, what nation is trying to be like the Most High? Okay, it's Esau. What nation, had their empire going back to, pagan Rome and rebuilt it again in the earth, man? It fell and it was rebuilt again. Said we will come and rebuild again the impoverished places. Micah 1:4. Okay, so when you look at, all right, the the record that's on the man, well, guess what? It's proof that he's the wicked. Okay, everything that he does, man. Who will rule the earth in violence? Who will be continually at war? Okay, who will steal, kill, and destroy? It's all that they do in the earth. Yahweh Shai said, the thief coming out, but to steal, kill, and destroy. Who does that? Whose rulership is all about that, man? So that's the proof. Okay, so it said, have you not asked them to go by the way? You see, and the Lord has given the answers, okay, to these mysteries to the prophets. And do you not know their tokens? That the wicked is reserved for the day of destruction. So the Lord, all right, has this man in power, you know, and gave this man the sword, you know, the witchcraft, the finances. Okay. And this is the way that the Lord has reserved this man to the day of destruction. Okay. Because the Lord wants wants Esau to be in power at the return of Yahweh. Okay. So it can be that war in heaven, because John the Revelator, he spoke on that. You see, in order for it to be a war in heaven against the dragon, okay, which is Rome revived back in the earth, the dragon, well, the dragon had to be what? Revived in the earth and still be in power at the return of Yahweh. You see? So the Lord reserved Esau by giving him all this power in the earth, man. All right, to ensure that he will be in power at the return of Yahweh, so he can be brought to the king of terrors, man. It says they shall be brought forth to the day of wrath. Okay, so he's been, you see, so all this power is going to disappear instantly, man. Okay, all this power that the Lord gave Esau is going to disappear instantly, man. When Yahweh hit the scene, power gone. Okay, verse 31 said, "Who shall declare his way to his face, or who shall repay him what he have done?" Okay, and that's the prophets who's declaring this man's way to his face. And it's going to be Yahweh that's going to come and repay him for what he have done. You know, but he has the prophets, okay, declaring this man's way to his face. Okay, the scriptures say what? Go to the gates of the noble, shake the hand at the gates of the noble. Isaiah 13. Okay, what does Isaiah 13 say? The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos did see. Lift you up a banner upon the high mountain, exalt the voice unto them, shake the hand that they may go into the gates of the nobles, man. Okay, this high mountain is America, man. You know, this is the exalted government of this Edomite empire, man. Okay, this has been the exalted government, you see, and the gates of the noble, these are the elites, man. You know, so we're commanded to go shake the hand at the elites, man. And right now, the gates are the internet, okay? Because in those ancient cities, you know, you have nobles and elders at the gate, you know, and they would, be there, all right, to, to scrutinize or to, oversee the traffic that will go in and out. You know, they will be there to, question the traffic that was going in and out the gates. Okay, and you have men of status at those gates, okay, to check who was coming in, all right, and who was coming out. Okay, so right now the elites are the nobles at the gates. Okay, because they oversee, the traffic, the internet. They oversee these things. You see, they're not just watching. They got systems set up to oversee these things, man. And you best believe they tuned into the prophets, man. Okay, and they're being told about themselves, man. Okay, yeah, they got all this power, but their power is given to them, and it's going to be taken from them. You see? So let's go from there, because you go, let's go here real quick to live in Psalms too, because it's one thing just to know about it, but it's the Lord has called his men to speak against this man. Okay, we're in the time now, all right, well, it's time to speak against this damn devil, man. You see, clear his way to his face. All right, and then it's Psalm 94:16. It says, "Who, will rise up for me against the evildoers, or who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity?" Okay, so the Lord has risen up a spiritual army, all right, to prophesy against the kingdom of Edom, to speak against Mount Seir, okay, to speak against, all right, this new world order, man, which this new world order is a sacrifice that the Lord is finna reject. Okay, The Lord's finna reject Esau's sacrifice, man. Okay, and he's raised up the prophets in his days. Okay, to be with him against the evildoers, man. You know, and remember, our weapons are spiritual. Okay, because the devil runs the earth through deception and enchantments, man. Okay, and this truth is breaking down the enchantments and the deception. You know, so this devil, all right, he's getting resistance in the spirit, which he hasn't got resistance in the spirit for most of the time he was in power. You know, but just after those 3 days and a half, okay, the spirit of life began to enter into the Lord's men. Okay, and now you have a spiritual army, okay, that the Lord has raised up to speak against the evildoers, man. They're standing for righteousness in the midst of wickedness, man. You know, just calling this man out, you know, and telling him his judgment. What does say the Lord? Okay, they got all this power, but guess what? They can't stop themselves from going into captivity. Okay, they can't stop America from being destroyed. Okay, they can't stop themselves from death. You know, they have no power over death. You see, and the Lord told us, man. Let's go to Isaiah 2 and get to the point. It's Isaiah 2:17. It says, "In the loftiness of man shall be bowed down, and the haughtiness of men shall be made low." So the Lord's finna bring down all this pride that's in the earth, man. You know, starting with these elites, you know, because their pride comes from what? Their wealth, okay, their influence, all right, their ability, you know, to tap into witchcraft and technology, okay, you know, all this influence that they've had over the earth, you see, has made him extremely proud, man, to the point where he's delusional and he thinks that he can, all right, sidestep prophecy, man. You know, that he can alter prophecy in his favor. Nah, man. Okay, the Lord finna bring all their pride low, and the Lord Yahweh Bahashim Yahushua alone will be established in that day. Okay, so the Lord alone is gonna be established in that day, man. And I want to jump down, all right, to verse 20 says, "In that day, a man shall cast his idols of silver and idols of gold, which they made each one for himself to worship, to the moles and to the bats, to go into the clefts of the rocks, and in the top of the ragged rocks, for fear of the Lord and for the glory of his majesty, when he arises to shake terribly the earth," man. You know, so when the Heavenly Father sends Yahushua is coming in the name and authority of his Father. You know, Yahushua said, "I'm coming in the glory of my Father, my own glory, and of the angels," man. Okay, so when Yahushua, all right, into this realm with all their power, man, all right, these devils, okay, are gonna be terrified in those bunkers, man. Okay, in those underground cities, you know, some of them in space stations. Okay, because no matter where they go, guess what? And that's another thing. The devil can't run. Okay, there's nothing he can do that can stop himself from going to captivity, man. Okay, there's nothing he can do to stop his kingdom from ending. Okay, so what power does he really have? Okay, what power does this devil really have? Okay, the Lord just let this nigga borrow some power for a time, man. That nigga really ain't got no power. And it says, "And for the glory of his majesty, when he arises to shake terribly the earth." It says, "Cease you from man, whose breath is in his nostrils, from wherein is he to be accounted of, man? For wherein is he to be accounted of, man? His breath is in his nostrils, man." Okay, which means that if he stopped breathing, he die just like a bum on the street. Okay, he boasts himself in having all this power, but guess what? If his heart stopped for the same amount of time, okay, there's someone that's homeless, okay, guess what? He dies as the same effect. You see? All right, and hey, the Lord finna pack these niggas up, man. It's time to get Esau ass out of here, man. Okay, and he's in control of all these things, and the earth is in the worst place that it's ever been under this nigga, man. Okay, let's go here to Luke. End it here. The book of Luke, chapter 10. All right. This is the book of Luke, chapter 10, verse 18. And it says, and he said, this is Yahushua, all right, speaking to the disciples, and he said unto them, I beheld Satan, all right, and Satan represents Esau, because Esau is the physical counterpart of Satan in the earth. That's who's in power. Okay? These Edomites, they rule the earth possessed by Satan, man. Okay? When you go into these elites and these higher ups, man, these people are Satanists, man. Okay? It says, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven, and that's his rulership. Okay? And that's his rulership, man. So Yahushua said, look, I seen Satan fall like lightning from heaven, man. And this Esau swiftly falling from his rulership, because when Yahushua comes into his realm, it's over. It's going to be lightning quick, because we're going to be changed at the twinkling of an eye. Okay? Victory over death. And Yahushua going to be getting busy, all right, on Esau and these heathens, man. So it's going to be a quick fall. Okay? It's an extended build up to a quick fall, man. Okay? So Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you few sisters edified till next time I say Shalom. Kwame Shalom. Abba soon. Shalom.